part of the show is co-hosted by my friend and Forbes coach, Peter Jansen. And he will ask questions to the next panel from his perspective of leadership. In order for us to transform our society in the action that is desperately needed, we need radical transformations on all levels, and this requires leadership. It's my pleasure to introduce now the three guests that are role models in this area and who work on solutions. They all have amazing bios that you can check out on wedon'thavetime.org. Let's first introduce Paul Dickinson. Hello there, Paul. You're with us from London. You are founder of CDP in 2000 with an ambition of creating a global economic system that operates within the planetary boundaries. Great to have you with us.
We're definitely trying.
Great. And with us from the island La Palma, we have Nuria Albet. And Nuria has created a fantastic grassroots, bottom-up approach to renewable energy. And also with us in the studio here, we have Tomer Shallit. And Tomer, you're based here in Sweden, so that's why you can be with us here in the studio. And you have founded the Swedish-based technology company ClimateView. Let's start with you, Paul. I'd like to ask you the question: what is CDP, and how did you come up with the idea?
Well, I got a chance to say this very briefly a little while ago. The essential idea behind CDP is one big idea, which is that I'm 55. I grew up expecting governments to be able to solve problems. That was really my upbringing. We had the Cold War, and we had all kinds of big stuff, and big problems were solved by big governments. But as I got older, I began to realize that national governments were diminishing in a certain sense in their importance. And so-called non-state actors, which is a term the United Nations uses, non-state actors were becoming more and more important. And so in 2001, actually, with a whole bunch of other people, we started a project to say, well, what would happen if the world's largest corporations reported annually, publicly, on their actions on climate change, their greenhouse gas emissions and their activities on climate change? So we got together with a whole bunch of big shareholders. Actually, now we represent more than 600 shareholders with about $80 trillion, which is equivalent to the GDP of the whole world. Amazing. And on behalf of those shareholders, we write to companies and we say, please provide us with a lot of information on your greenhouse gas emissions and your strategy on climate change. We're a charity operating globally. And this year, 8,000 of the world's largest companies provided that data into CDP. And it's made available to everybody. It's used by investors. But I would encourage anyone listening to the show, go to cdp.net and you can put in any company name and download. I looked at McDonald's, the food company McDonald's. I looked at their response the other day. There's 20,000 words, masses of incredibly detailed information. And we're here to serve at helping corporations evolve to understand their role in the world.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So, Tomer, please explain your method. ClimateView.
Well, if you imagine a movie, any movie where there's some kind of big crisis, there's often a situation room where people gather. Mm-hmm. We are building the situation room for the climate. But it's a very open room. It's open for politicians, for public servants, for NGOs, for experts, for the public, for everyone. And Sweden was the first country to go live in the Situation Room already in June, and it's completely public. And we're now onboarding a number of regions and cities in Europe to create their own Situation Rooms. Because what we do in the Situation Rooms is help the cities to figure out how to get to zero. So I'll just show you very briefly. So basically what we're doing is collecting massive amounts of data, such as what Paul was talking about, the CDP data. And you collect it all to create the big overview. So for Sweden, we have Sweden's greenhouse gas emissions, the potentials for reduction, the indicators how it's going. So the greenhouse gas emissions are transport, industry, agriculture, the widths showing how much they are. And basically you zoom down to see, okay, how are we going to get rid of emissions from passenger transport? Well, reduced energy usage.
Very detailed.
And you just dive down all the way, layer by layer, all the way down to the specific policies, showing exactly how the gaps are and showing exactly where what we are doing and what is going wrong. So yeah.
This is fantastic, and it's been used by governments and cities and also companies.
Yes, exactly.
And also NGOs, because I know, Nuria, you're already collaborating with Tomer, correct?
Yes, and actually, I want to start thanking We Don't Have Time, because we discovered ClimateView in the previous event of We Don't Have Time. So you're doing a really good job in connecting projects. Yes, and it's working. It's very interesting how we are working with We Don't Have Time. We are a grassroots movement, but we are working inside the public administration, the island council, actually. So we have this bottom-up approach in our DNA. And we were selected as a pilot island from the European Commission project for clean energy for EU islands in February. So being a pilot, what it means that we have to test different ways of writing a transition agenda. And of course, if the ones that succeed, other islands and mainland can copy us. And if we don't succeed, then the others, they will also learn about our failure, right? So our way of writing this agenda, we thought in the beginning that the document is something very close, that very few write and even less read, and we were afraid it would last, like it would be nothing at the end, right? So when we saw ClimateView, we thought it would be perfect. Why? Different reasons. One of them is that we are very broad movement. We actually have more than 100 organizations in the island have signed a pledge to decarbonize the island. We have from football teams to telescopes to associations, and it's really broad. And everyone has to understand the language we are talking. If we're talking a document, people that don't have so much education will not be in the same way. But in ClimateView, we believe that it's much easier, that everyone will be collaborating and also willing to act. We have been doing the first workshops already, and I think it's quite potent when you don't only work in the digital version, you also have this paper version, a big roll of paper, and when you put that in the room directly, people understand what we're trying to do, and it's much easier to coordinate all the actors to achieve the goal, which is huge.
Must feel pretty great to Nuria, talk about your tool. Huh? So over to you now, Peter. Let's have you dig a bit deeper into the leadership aspect.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm really, really happy to be here again. It's fantastic, and very excited to have these wonderful guests with us today. So my first question is going to be for Paul. Paul, we've spoken a bit before, and we're going to go deeper into this in our next show. But I would like you to explain to us what your vision is. Okay, it's really interesting that there's no lack of information out there. Just there's lack of filters, and there's a lack of efficient and effective ways of collecting this data. But I'm interested in the projection to the future. How do you see this actually affecting and working for a greater climate?
And so I'm going to reference something that I was invited actually to go and give a little talk at a Swedish business society, but it was founded by some social scientists. And I want to focus on that phrase, social science. Like, we are coming together, all of us, to solve climate change because, as social scientists would say, and actually this is what Extinction Rebellion in the UK have said, and it's what a philosopher called Thomas Hobbes said, which is that the state gets its authority from its ability to protect us. The king or the queen or, the feudal lords or whatever. We would put up with them and the terrible things they did because they would kind of ultimately protect us from the people, over the mountain who would come and beat us up. Well, or enslave us, actually, if you go back far enough. Now, before, I don't know, the Berlin Wall fell or whatever, there was a contest between the West and the Soviet system, and government was strong and, things got done. But then over the last 4 or 5 decades of globalization, governments just kind of floated down into a box. Business has got better and better at using the media to kind of protect its interests. And to be completely honest with you, existing kind of cash flows protect themselves. There was talk earlier about massive subsidy of the fossil fuel industry. When there's a lot of money at stake, governments can't pass laws because if anyone in any kind of government anywhere says, look, we've got to put taxes or regulate these greenhouse gas emissions to protect the economy, we've got to get rid of this, loser, right? So we're in a situation whereby, like, the machine that normally, solves a pollution problem like tax or regulation, that machine is broken. Okay? So we're having to kind of like reestablish some sort of authority in society that can deal with this problem, and that's where you get businesses, where you get civil society movements. Greta Thunberg came up earlier. Was saying what's so special about her? I said, what's so special about her? She says, listen to the scientists. And guess what? She's worked out that this is discrimination. We had discrimination against women. They got the vote. We had a very brave movement called the suffragettes in the UK, many other countries. We had discrimination against black people, for example, in the US. We had Martin Luther King came forward. Greta Thunberg says we got discrimination against children. I mean, it's kind of offensive, but it's true. So we got, more than 1 million children striking around the world saying, hey, old people, you can't discriminate against us. So what we're seeing is some kind of complicated social force coming, get us back to the idea that government protects us, because currently they haven't got the power. Kind of long, weird answer, but I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a fantastic answer. Thank you so very much, Paul. Okay, so Tomer, back in the studio. It's nice to see you again. And my question to you goes to the chunking down. I saw how you chunked the data down. I'd like to understand long-term the vision that you have on how this is going to go from conversation to roadmap to action.
The underlying theory here of a couple of underlying theories of change, so to speak, is first of all, take something that's far away and very abstract and bring it closer. So we're talking about emissions go down 0, 2030, but that's all pretty abstract. And even what's going to happen if we don't do it is even more abstract and far away. But by bringing it down to something that's measurable on a monthly or quarterly level, we are forced to act. And also, instead of making something abstract and dangerous, with putting something close and actually often very positive. More electric vehicles is offering better air quality straight away. So really, it's what this is all about is taking data and visualizing it to nudge decision making by making decisions much closer and much more evident. So we can't hide behind numbers, we can't hide behind things far away, but we bring things close and we bring things evident so that we're forced to make decisions now.
Well, that's fantastic. It is very true. When you focus on the now, it's easy to get rid of the obstacles. But we also need to keep an eye in the future. We really need to look at, is that vision, long-term vision, and you need to break it down, chunkable sizes, and that's exactly what you're doing, and it's fantastic. And I congratulate you. It's great. And you and I need to have a lot of other conversations. And now to you, Nuria. Back in La Palma, of course, you've got an amazing project. And you started off, it's a grassroots project, but it's also policy-driven, right? And it's really interesting to have spoken to you before about this, but one thing I haven't asked you yet, and of course, we'll go more into this in our other show. Of course, you need help to do all this. You don't only need the buy-in from the people and the buy-in from companies and organizations and so on. You also need people to, walk the streets and, give the message out there and get the buy-in from everybody else. How do you get to those people, and how do you get them to help you?
Yeah, that's not an easy question to answer. I think what Tomer was saying, right? He's making these things easy to act, but still people sometimes don't act. So we have seen that we have to act a lot, work with the emotional side. It's not about only knowing the data, knowing what we have to do, but it's also doing it, right? And very often we have to work with the trust. We have to make people trust the process, and you also have to make people actually see each other not as a competitor, competing. We're so used to compete in our society, right? So we have to change a lot of ways of thinking. In our project, we have been working a lot in making people own the project themselves. It's not something that someone else is doing, but we are all together into this the same goal. We have the same goals. We have to solve the same problems, the same challenges. So I'm not sure I can say exactly, because there are many small pieces that have to go together, but it's a lot about talking to people. You have to spend the time. It's an investment to spend the time to talk to people, looking at their eyes, and create a community, so everyone feels empowered.
So what you're saying here is basically, what you're explaining is empathy.
Yes, very much. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So you need a certain level of emotional intelligence within your leadership to be able to go to people and say to them, you know what, I need your help. Help us. And then for them to get the buy-in from everybody else, that also requires that same empathy. So it's very interesting how we can see this going from what Paul had said and the big data and all that information that gets filtered down, and then it gets used through processes like Tomer's processes. And then we need that action that comes from organizations and people like you, Nuria. And I think this is amazing how it all really boils down to, let's do the best we can. And empathy is one of the biggest tools. So, Paul, what does empathy have to do with everything that you are doing? I'd like to really understand that, because I want the whole picture.
I think, we're not very good at empathy, humans, to be honest with you. Like, if we're quite good near us. So if you fall over if you fall over in the street, in Sweden or the UK or something, there's a pretty good health service who kind of spend tens of thousands of euros trying to save your life. Really, if you get on an airplane, travel about 5 hours, then there are people just dying, for 10 euro or 100 euro could save their lives, and nothing's happening. They're dying. So, we've got some lessons to learn on empathy. But one of the things is that about climate change is you have to get kind of selfishly empathetic. The last time the scientists reported to us the so-called fifth assessment, one of them told me, one of the people who was involved in writing it, they said, we scientists believe that between 2080 and 2140, there's a 50-50 chance of a 4 to 6 degree temperature change, which is bigger than between now and the last ice age. And I said, how many people are going to die if that happens? And he just rolled his eyes, So the thing about this empathy thing is, it's like, we're not very good at empathy for them, but actually it turns out it's empathy for us now, our grandchildren, or maybe our children, or maybe just like us. We're at a point where empathy sort of morphs or mutates into self-interest. That's the thing.
No, actually, you cannot have that which you do not possess. And empathy is one of those things. You cannot have empathy for anybody else if you don't have it for yourself. And that's important. That's important in leadership. It's important in humanity. And it's important for climate change. It's just simply important. Tomer, same question goes to you. In your processes, of course, you have to chunk things down. And in chunking down, you need to have that empathy. You're actually driving emotion in the smaller chunks. You're touching people. You're making these chunks so tiny that it's like, look, this is happening now. Can you tell me what you feel about that and how empathy plays a role in what you're doing?
It's funny because when you do the work, I nearly try to have the mindset that, like, just an algorithm, you just follow it, because that's how to get the work done. Because it's a lot of people that have to be collected in the room and have lots of opinions. So it's interesting that the mindset when you sort of do these workshops and sort of try and understand the data is just being very, very systematic, so as to get to first get some rational in somehow. But then, as you say, so it sounds cold-hearted, but of course, in the end of the day, this is all about building feedback loops that we understand and react on, because it's just putting a mirror that is close enough that we know what's going on. So yeah, it's all about empathy and just trying to use data to drive empathy in the right direction.
This is beautiful. So no matter how we look at it, leadership and change will always be about empathy. The interesting thing is this: change is automatic. We've seen this. It's just not always good. Progress is not automatic. And if we're going to progress in this world towards a better climate and a better humanity, we need to lead through empathy. And I believe this is essentially where we all need to come down together and say, look, it doesn't matter what we're doing. It doesn't matter what processes we're driving. It doesn't matter what business we have. It doesn't matter what data we're collecting. It doesn't matter how many people we have on the streets doing the work. At the end of the day, we need to empathize with ourselves so we can empathize with the others and with our planet. Any last thoughts on any of you on this?
I'm going to throw one in, which I think is, I think you put the point very beautifully, actually, when you talked about, like, you've got to have empathy for yourself. I'm certainly not religious, not from any kind of religious background, but someone told me that one of the problems of the religion and a certain way of thinking is if you put kind of God outside of yourself, you're going to trash everything because, you haven't kind of made the connection. I read a little poem on the London Underground that sort of said, we are actually all existence, and it's only the sort of chatter in our head that separates us from that truth.
Brilliant.
Well,
Brilliant.
Peter, I think we need to sum this up or round this up, and luckily we will have a more in-depth show in 2 weeks with Nuria and also with Paul and Tomer, and also Kate Garvey, who will be joining in the longer show that's called From Visions to Action. So thank you, Paul, and thank you, Nuria. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Tomer, for joining us. And to all of you viewers or listeners online, thank you for joining in. Thank you for taking action, and because I know you're already doing that in many aspects in your lives. And the next show, that will be on October 10th. And if you haven't started chatting with the guests already, please do that. The chat is open until 8:30 tonight. So chat and ask questions and interact, and just keep up the good work. Because we do know that we don't have time to wait, but we still have time to act.